it is. I do feel fine, and I hope you do too. Hi, YouTubers. Whoa, hey, stop that right there. Okay, no, we don't need that over again, do we? That's what happens when you're the sound technician, the producer, the editor, the executive director of Current Christian Commentary and News. I'm also the host, Pastor Steve. Hey, welcome to another edition. We've decided to go with quality instead of quantity on these episodes. I know it's been a couple days, but I missed you. I hope you missed us too. And I hope you get to watch some of the sermons that I put on the channel as well. I actually am a real pastor, but we'll talk about that some other day. Today is Monday, May 2nd. Looking forward to Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, he says extremely sarcastically. All right. Two stories today, and I'm going to connect the dots for you. Seems like the Lord has given me a ministry of connecting the dots. Just the last couple of years, the Lord has just been showing me in the Bible how to connect the dots. New Testament, Old Testament, Old Testament, New Testament, New Testament, New Testament. Connecting the dots always. And now, for whatever reason, it's spilling over into current events, and that's one of the reasons why I started this channel. But let's get to it, shall we? Two stories, separate stories. Going to connect the dots for you. First story is an article from the New York Times on April 15th. It's about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, April 15th, New York Times. Saudi Arabia has told the Obama administration and members of Congress that it will sell off hundreds of billions of dollars worth of American assets held by the kingdom if Congress passes a bill that would allow the Saudi government to be held responsible in American courts for any role in its September 11th, 2001 attacks. The Obama administration has lobbied Congress to block the bill's passage, according to administrative officials and congressional aides from both parties. And the Saudi threats have been the subject of intense discussions in recent weeks between lawmakers and officials of the State Department and the Pentagon. The officials have warned senators of diplomatic and economic fallout from this legislation. In essence, they're trying to pass a bill that would allow victims of 9/11 to sue the Saudi Arabian government, which would mean seizing their assets for damages because of Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11. Get to that in just a second. Abdel al-Jabeera, the Saudi foreign minister, delivered the kingdom's message personally last month during a trip to Washington, telling lawmakers that Saudi Arabia would be forced to sell $750 billion worth in Treasury securities, these are Treasury bonds, and other assets in the United States before they could be in danger of being frozen by the American courts. All right, that's part 1A. The second part of this dot to be connected is the 28 pages that were redacted from the 9/11 Commission report. They weren't really redacted. They're being withheld for security reasons. We now know that those 28 pages implicate the Saudi family, the royal family, the Saudi Arabian government, in the 9/11 attacks. My best guess, and the best guess out there, is that Saudi Arabia, it can be proven, or it is proven in those 28 pages, that Saudi Arabia was financing some, if not all, of the 9/11 hijackers. Now, why would they do that? I don't think, and it's possible, but I don't think they did it with the idea of having these guys crash planes into the Pentagon and into the World Trade Centers. I don't think that was the idea. I think, at least the cover story would be, we were funding them for education. Now, unfortunately, this education, and I don't have time to spend with you to teach you, but it's called Wahhabism. It is the foundation of education in Saudi Arabia. It is the birthing of jihad. Wahhabism is just a horrible, horrible way of life, teaching children to hate Jews and hate Israel and hate America and so on and so forth. So the Saudi government, Saudi royal family probably is saying, well, we just thought they were educating, Wahhabism, Saudi government, we had no idea that they were going to bomb that they were going to use these planes and bomb the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. By the way, for those of you that think that there were no planes, it's just a hologram and explosives, cut me a break, please, will you? I mean, where'd those children go? Where'd those people go? Those planes crashed into the towers. They crashed into the Pentagon. I had an acquaintance on the flight that crashed into the Pentagon. Her name was Barbara Olson. I didn't know her real well, but I certainly attended several functions with Barbara Olson when I worked in Washington, D.C. in 2001 as a lobbyist on Capitol Hill. All right, back to these 28 pages. All right, so and by the way, these 28 redacted pages, Congressman Walter Jones, who is one of the few congressman that has any integrity left. I trust Walter Jones. I've met him quite a few times. He's been in the House quite a long time. He doesn't get very far up the food ladder, up the food chain, like Speaker of the House or majority member, majority whip, or whatever the case may be, simply because he's just too honest. I write about Congressman Walter Jones in my autobiography, more specifically a friend of mine that was his communications director, Patty Maher, who worked for him. So that's how I got to know Walter Jones. He's sponsoring legislation right now. It's not going to go anywhere, but he's sponsoring legislation right now to force the release of those 28 pages. He wants to get at the truth. And the truth appears to be that the Saudi family was involved in financing to whatever extent. Now, I don't mean as far as dollars goes. They were paying for their housing and for their food and for their just about all of their expenses. Maybe the Saudi government knew that they were going to be terrorists. Maybe they didn't. I have no idea at this point. Good chance that they might have known, but we can't assume that. But they were certainly sending money to these terrorists. That has been documented. That's what's in the 28 pages. That's why President Obama didn't want it released. Now, if you dislike President Obama as much as I do, hold on to your seats, because President Bush Jr. is just as, well, senior too, but just as culpable with the Saudis. If you will recall, when all of the air traffic was stopped, there was no planes flying after 9/11 finally settled, and all the planes were grounded, nothing was moving anywhere. One set of planes, or plane or planes, was allowed to leave the country. You guessed it. President Bush made an exception for the Saudi family to get out of the United States and go back home. Why would they do that? Well, my guess is they had their tail between their legs thinking, oh no, they're going to realize these are the guys that we financed. Let's get the heck out of this country before they put us on trial and hang us for treason. Or like they do in Saudi Arabia, cut their heads off, cut their hands off. That's probably why they panicked and left the country. But my point is, President Bush allowed the Saudis to leave. Now, here we are. What is it? 2000. We're 15 years later. Now we're finding out. All right. So, and then get this. Yesterday, May 1st, on the Sunday talk shows, the CIA director says, "Oh, there's nothing. There's nothing in the 28 pages. Most of that information is inaccurate." Okay, he's the CIA director. Hello. So he gets on camera yesterday and lies to us. Whoa, almost broke my neck there. And lies to, it's live TV, folks, what can I tell you? Well, it's not really TV, but I get it. But at any rate, so he gets on the morning talk shows yesterday and says, no, there's nothing to those 28 pages. Well, come on, man, he's the CIA director. I trust him. Not. All right, a couple of theories here about these 28 pages, and then I want to move on to the connection to the violence that's taking place revolving around the elections in the United States. First theory, and the mainstream theory, mainstream media theory, is that the Saudis will not, the papers will not be released, and the Saudis will not freeze the $750 billion or liquidate the $750 billion in treasury bonds because it would hurt themselves. That's theory number one. That's proposed by the New York Times and other mainstream media. They're just not going to do it. It's possible. Theory number two, that Congress will pass a bill, and this is the one I told you about that Walter Jones is sponsoring, and of course the president will veto. Not enough votes to override the veto, I don't think. Theory number three, and this is where it gets interesting. Again, we're connecting the dots. That President Obama will not release the 28 pages. Now remember, this is 28 pages that George Bush Jr. absolutely knew about, having allowed the Saudis to fly home. George Bush knew about the Saudi connection very early on in the 9/11 attacks. So we're not going to, I'm going to hold his feet to the fire just like I would anybody else. Obama will not release these pages. This is the third theory, because it will destroy his own multi-million-dollar retirement fund. He's counting on the Saudis. Remember, when President Obama first became president, when he did his world apology tour, one of the first things he did was get to the Saudi king and bowed. First time in the history of the United States that a sitting president bowed to a foreign king. It was despicable, it was disgusting, but it was a telltale sign of the times that we're in right now. Whole subject for another show. So his own retirement is at stake. Maybe he won't release it. Then there's another theory. This is number 4. We're connecting the dots here today, folks. Obama will release the 28 pages simply because the idea that it will ruin or continue to escalate the economic meltdown that you and I are now suffering. Wages have been frozen for just about the entire 8 years of President Obama's presidency. The GDP has actually shrunk on, contrary to all the lies that the White House has been telling about this great economy and how it's bounced back. Baloney. Go to the store. Check out how small the packages are. Check out how high the prices are. Check out your own wages. Check out your own standard of living. Hasn't improved. Are you kidding me? They're nothing but a bunch of liars. And this guy is the king of all liars. Next to Satan himself, but not going to go there right now. So if he releases the 28 pages, it'll be in the hopes that it actually does continue to wreck and ruin the economy. All right, so now if we go from there to, let's see, this article, did I read this to you? Yeah, I've already read this to you. I'm not going to read it to you again. But I want to go to the violence that's taking place around the country. This is a planned escalation of violence, folks. History is repeating itself. We're seeing it happen right before our very eyes. You've got the Black Lives Matter crowd attacking and disrupting all or most of Bernie Sanders's political stump speeches, and you've got the La Raza crowd, the Mexican crowd, attacking and disrupting Donald Trump's speeches. So you're getting it from both ends. History is repeating itself, folks. The only thing that's missing are the actual brown shirts. Oh, which reminds me, before I forget. Yes, thank you for writing, but yes, this is how I dress every day. I have about 30 of these t-shirts. I always wear a clean one. Sometimes I put 2 or 3 on a day, depending on how much work I'm doing or how much sweating I'm doing. But thank you for asking. It's not the same t-shirt. I've got about 30 of them. Appreciate those cards and emails. All right, back to the violence. It's, if you didn't laugh, you'd have to cry. All right, so back to the violence. So all this violence is literally history repeating itself. Now, right now, I'm just going to show you the most mild video clip I could find of mostly young people, but you'll see these young people. I don't think there's any curse words in English. If there are, I apologize in advance. There certainly is cursing in Spanish. You'll see one woman moon Trump supporters on their way to a Donald Trump campaign speech. But this is what we're getting at, folks. We're getting at the point where violence is acceptable for the reason. No more free speech. Forget about free speech. That went out the window. Try being a conservative and speaking on a college campus today. But let me just show you this video here real quick. And this is just a sampling with not much violence, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But this is the mentality, the brainwashed mentality of what's happening all over the country at Donald Trump speeches, especially in California.
Pinche puto, vete a la verga, mira,
so there you saw it. These kids are you know, they're Bernie supporters. They, you know, the idea that we can both have opinions and get along and difference of opinions, well, those days are out. But the violence is continuing. Again, the Black Lives Matter crowd are disrupting Bernie Sanders stump speeches, and the La Raza crowd, which is La Raza means the race in English, is disrupting and interrupting Donald Trump's speeches all over the country. Here's a picture of a man who got hurt. He's got a bloody head there. And now some of the riots that took place in California, you'll see this kid jumping on a cop car. And what's happening, folks, in California is that these folks are like blocking the streets, breaking windows, doing a bunch of damage. The cops are overwhelmed. There's too many protesters to arrest everybody. This is all planned. Again, it gets back to the brown shirts, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Take a look at this picture. This is just a sampling of some of the young men who are protesting in the United States carrying Mexican flags. And in this picture, you'll see some of the more violent acts that are taking place. No different than when Hitler sent out young men before World War II to take over Germany. They were called the Brown Shirts. They intimidated businesses, they broke windows, they smashed businesses. If you disagreed with them, they would beat you up in the streets. The same sort of thing is happening now in the United States, only it's repeating itself just like it did. This is all part of the plan, folks. Out of chaos comes order. This is from Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals. And, you know, this is exactly what he wrote about. Saul Alinsky wrote about destroying the United States of America from the inside and imploding. Now, get this. Saul Alinsky, one of his disciples, was a guy by the name of Bill Ayers. Most of you know Bill Ayers. Now, some of you don't know any of this stuff, and you're just hearing this for the first time. But Bill Ayers was neighbors in the same neighborhood and had meetings with President Obama when he was then state senator Barack Obama, trying to work his way up to the presidency. Where else can you go and have a sitting senator, United States senator, work for about 154 days and then become president of the United States? Well, this was all part of the plan, financed by guys like George Soros, and we can go on and on with the conspiracies, but they're not conspiracies; they're true. All right, so Bill Ayers is a disciple of Saul Alinsky, who wrote Rules for Radicals. Guess who did her doctoral thesis supporting Saul Alinsky and was a Saul Alinskyite? She was a Saul Alinsky fan. You guessed it, Hillary Rodham Clinton. All right, so we're connecting all these dots. Let's get back to La Raza. You have to actually live here, like in southern Arizona or in California or southern California or in Texas near El Paso to understand how ingrained the education of young Mexicans and young Mexican Americans is towards anti-United States sentiment, United States sentiment against our government, the United States of America. So this sentiment has been festering for many, many years. That's why they call themselves La Raza, the race. They actually believe that, Santa Anna, who actually signed over California, parts of New Mexico, parts of Texas, Arizona, and parts of California, the United States compensated. You know the history. I'm not going to get into it, but Santa Anna, attacked at the Alamo, and those guys stood out without any help, and then Santa Anna continued to move forward. Sam Houston came in and cut them off and forced Santa Anna to surrender, and that's how the United States, who compensated Mexico for this land, that's how this became part of the United States. Their stated goal of La Raza is Aztlan, Aztlan. Aztlan is essentially, I'll show it to you right here. They want to take back this area, this geographical area, and make it part of Mexico again. That's their stated goal, folks. It's not going to happen without violence. That's another contributing factor to the chaos that's happening. Then you add that to the President of the United States calling the police officers stupid and how they acted stupidly, and how Beyonce has a Black Panther anti-police show at the Super Bowl, and now her latest video is one of her walking up and down the street with a baseball bat, smashing windows and crashing things. All part of the chaos. So you've got chaos coming from the left. You've got chaos coming from the right. You've got chaos happening all over the country. And I'm telling you, folks, this is engineered chaos. This is engineered violence. There's only one answer for all of it, and that's to understand that the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, and the Lord of Lords, when and if he comes into your heart, he will bring you peace. He will bring sovereignty. And eventually, folks, not too long from now, what they say is Maranatha, even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus. If you don't know Jesus in your heart today, this is all very unsettling. If you do know Jesus in your heart, it can be very unsettling. But I'm telling you, those of us that know Christ are going to be, Jesus is going to see us through this storm. I'm not saying that bad things aren't going to happen, and if the bank collapses, your savings account, your retirement may disappear. It may get really, really bad before it gets better. But the only one that we can look forward to is not a leader, is not a party, is not an organization. The only one that we can look forward to as Christians and believers is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, because when he comes back, he actually will rule and reign, and I hope he rules and reigns in your hearts. All right, folks, I know I covered a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. I hope you're doing well. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. It is the end of the world as we know it, but I hope you feel fine. God bless.